The great thing about news is you never know what's going to happen. Hello, welcome to the Full Comment Podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. And while we had planned on doing an episode that would mainly focus on floor crossers and Matt Jeneroux, Mark Carney's attempt to get a majority government by poaching other MPs, well, events, dear boy, events, as they say. Donald Trump's tariffs struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court on Friday morning, just prior to recording. But wait, it doesn't really apply to Canada. And there's more, as they say in those late-night infomercials. So we've pivoted. We're still going to talk about floor crossers, such as Matt Jeneroux, joining Mark Carney earlier this week.
Matt brings a wealth of experience despite his young demeanor. He brings a wealth of experience. First became a member of the Legislative Assembly here in Alberta in 2012. Yeah, and then elected 4 consecutive times as an MP. Edmonton River Bend, I know it well from my time growing up, although it's changed a fair bit since I was when I was here. And a lot of parliamentary experience, including as on the international side, on the security side.
But we'll start with the idea of the Supreme Court striking down Donald Trump's tariffs. It was a short-lived victory as Trump popped up to say, wait a minute, I'm going to keep more tariffs in place.
Today I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122, over and above our normal tariffs already being charged. And we're also initiating several Section 301 and other investigations to protect our country from unfair trading practices of other countries and companies.
A whirlwind week of news, a week where there's so much happening, you don't know where to start. Joining me to talk about all of that this week are 2 post-media columnists, Lorne Gunter and Chris Selley. So, Chris, Lorne, thanks for joining me in a very uneventful week in politics. Let's start with the tariff situation because, as we talk here on Friday afternoon, that is the new news. A lot of Canadians celebrating, and I'm not sure why. One, the Supreme Court ruling doesn't apply to the tariffs that are on our lumber, on our steel, our aluminum, our autos. And by the way, Donald Trump just imposed new tariffs on everything else. So should we be celebrating? Is this something to celebrate, Lorne?
Yeah, it's a psychological victory. If you listen to what he was saying after this decision came out, the man who's already unhinged at most times became even more unhinged. He's more bombastic. He's more of a blowhard than he ever has been. He said, the Supreme Court is disloyal to the United States. The 6 judges out of 9 who voted against me are afraid to stand up for me. No, for crying out loud! For once, somebody was willing to stand up to him and tell him he can't do what he wants to do. The U.S. Constitution is very clear. Tariff powers are exclusively with Congress. Congress wouldn't stand up to him. So thank goodness the Supreme Court did. So from that standpoint, I know that there's not going to affect much about Canada-U.S. trade, but psychologically, I love it.
My big concern with U.S. politics is always, how does it impact Canada? That's what I've reduced myself to over the last bunch of years, Chris, because otherwise it just gets quite exhausting. This won't impact our tariffs on the aforementioned goods, the steel, the aluminum, the auto, the lumber. These are the things that are really hurting us economically. How do you view it?
I mean, it seems to me that there could be I agree with Lauren about it being a psychological victory in the sense that it's a defeat. I mean, we shouldn't be as obsessed with American politics as we are, even though God knows it has a huge effect on us. But to me, it is a huge psychological victory, if only because supposedly the Supreme Court, the whole narrative was that the Supreme Court is in Trump's back pocket, right? They'll do anything he wants. And if they ever didn't do what he wanted, then he would just defy them. But he can't do that with this, right? I mean, tariffs either exist or they don't. So there's I think I agree with about a psychological victory, but I think also possibly in terms of how it might benefit Canada, if it just makes Trump look dumb, and kind of useless, and more people notice him ranting and raving and really losing the plot, which I really think he is. Like, we've been hearing people say Donald Trump's losing the plot for 10 plus years, but to me right now he is losing the plot. So I think potentially it could just weaken his position in trying to just fight this stupid war against Canada and Denmark, and everyone else.
Yeah, the IEEPA tariffs, the International Emergency Economics Act, or whatever it's called, they are the ones that were struck down. The Section 232 tariffs weren't even challenged because, the law is very clear. That's Section 232 under the 1962 Trade Expansion Act. And in that case, Lauren, Congress clearly gave up the ability to impose tariffs for national security measures to the president, and those are the ones that are hitting us. By the way, the judges that voted against Donald Trump and were disloyal, Chief Justice John Roberts, Justice Neil Gorsuch, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, those are three that are supposed to be on his side. And then the three liberal judges, Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Tanya Brown Jackson, were the other three of the six, with Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh voting agreeing with the dissent that it was allowable under the law. But 6-3 is a majority, so Trump loses.
Only one of the judges who voted in his favor was a Trump appointee. That's Kavanaugh. And so this is a resounding defeat for Trump, because even the people he appointed to the court in his first term mostly voted against him.
Gorsuch and Coney Barrett.
Yes.
Well, and I find the fact too that the ruling goes back. I mean, the thing I found that made me chuckle was that the ruling was just sort of like tariffs or taxes. Like, it goes out of its way to point this out, that this goes back to like the War of Independence, right? This is fundamental to American society, that taxes, though not all tariffs, as Brian points out, are the bailiwick of Congress, and tariffs are taxes on American consumers, and it's just there in black and white, and it just completely blows up his whole, the other countries pay the tariffs narrative, or
well, we always knew that was incorrect.
Yeah, I'm not sure Americans did, though.
I'm not sure Trump knows it's incorrect.
In some instances, it's not, because I do remember he said to Walmart, "You're going to eat some of this," and guess what? They did.
Yep. But he said today, when he was speaking about this decision, he said today that, we still have to keep foreigners paying our tariffs, and, we have to keep them down with these tariffs. And I think it's quite clear that he muddles this up in his mind all the time. That somebody told him, probably Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, told him that if they impose tariffs, they'll be able to rehome all sorts of manufacturing from overseas. And that's all Trump wanted to know, because he's going after that former assembly line worker vote. And so it doesn't matter to him how it works. He just thinks tariffs are the most beautiful word in the dictionary.
But he does have smart people around him who believe that this is the right way to go. You can think Peter Navarro's crazy, but the man has a PhD in economics from Harvard, and he fully believes in tariffs. Has it? He's got a PhD from, I think it's University of Pennsylvania Business School in economics. He fully believes in tariffs. Jameson Greer, his U.S. trade representative, is the architect of all this. And they found a new way to do it, which is the 1974 Trade Act. They're going to impose a 10% global tariff. So, I mean, these guys are determined. We have, as Canadians, spent far too much time trying to convince these guys, who are true believers in tariffs, that tariffs are bad. We sound like the high school teacher in Ferris Bueller's Day Off talking about Smoot Hawley. And just like the kids in Ferris Bueller, the Trump guys are falling asleep. And they're happy to go about with tariffs. we need to find a negotiated settlement to get these either lifted or reduced, and we're not doing that.
No, we're imposing our own tariffs. The things that, well, not so much as Carney said we would, I guess. But I mean, we have this, we're not selling American liquor. This is our
We are.
Yeah, you are
this
in
is our
Alberta.
response. Yeah, it's sorry. Even as I was saying it, I was like, oh, Lawrence on this.
And Quebec's putting it back on the
Yep.
table.
Oh, I can go to my local liquor store and get all the bourbon I want.
And California Red.
But yeah, we just haven't responded. To me, we haven't responded in a way that's sort of principled, where we can claim that that we actually believe in what we're trying to preach to Washington. That's sort of what I'm saying.
I was thinking about that the other day. Doug Ford got his win with Diageo. Now, Diageo, the global drinks maker, had announced that it was closing a bottling plant in Amherstburg, Ontario, just outside of Windsor. A bottling plant that, in my view, never made any sense. They took Crown Royal and added flavor to it to make the apple and the peach Crown Royal and all of that. And they bottled it there. It was never made there. It was either made in Valleyfield, Quebec, hundreds of kilometers away, or in Gimli, Manitoba, thousands of kilometers away. Why were you bottling it there to then ship to the US? So that, economically, it didn't make sense. It had nothing to do with tariffs, but Doug Ford, sounding very much like Trump, said, you're going to do what I want or you're going to pay. And he fought and he fought and he said, I'm going to take Crown Royal off the shelves if you don't do this, and eventually all Diageo products off the table. He sounded exactly like Trump at that point. Well, guess what? It worked, and he got $23 million worth of concessions from the company, just announced last week. So, we are not being the purists that we're demanding the others be once again. Everyone seems to be adopting Trump's measures of protectionism and you'll do this or else.
Well, it's just a lack of imagination, to my mind.
Yeah, and it's also self-destructive. What we learned about tariffs and free trade is that if we do what we're good at and other countries do what they're good at, the sum total of all of that manufacturing and trade is higher than if we all try to do everything for ourselves. Like if we're better at making scotch, we're not, but if we were, we make a whole bunch of it and trade it with the rest of the world. Like one of the best arguments against Trump's tariffs that I saw was from a woman in California who owns a bakery. And she posted on Facebook right after this started last year that she has a trade deficit with the grocery store where she buys her supplies. But that trade deficit enables her to make goods that she can sell at a profit. So we've known for years that tariffs were a mess. They sort of went out of fashion with David Ricardo back in the 1700s. So I've always been upset. I don't care how many PhDs he's got around him. It doesn't matter. It's a ridiculous economic policy. And thankfully, psychologically now, maybe some of the rest of the world will stand up to him.
And one of the frustrating things I find is that with this liquor thing, as stupid as I find it, and sort of offensive, like we're limiting Canadians' choices because of Donald Trump. Like, what? Why are we doing this? It's one of the only, because Ontario, for example, the LCBO must be one of the biggest purchasers of alcohol in the world. So it's one of the only places where the Premier of Ontario can ever sort of have a comparable bully pulpit to Donald Trump or any other American president, because that's one place where there's leverage. But it relies on government liquor stores. I mean, it's just it's frustrating living next to the United States, isn't it? But we have to find a way to do it.
To go back to what Lorne was just saying, and I agree with you that tariffs are a mess, Lorne, and I'm not a fan of them, but the other guys are, and it's not just a fad. Like Your premier told me to read this book by Robert Lighthizer a year ago to understand what they're talking about. No trade is free, changing course, taking on China, and helping America's workers. They believe that this will benefit America's workers, that it'll bring jobs back to America. They fully believe that. It's not a fad for them. And if we're still arguing as if we should just convince them that tariffs are bad, then nothing will change until, well, we get a new administration in that doesn't believe that. And if J.D. Vance gets in or Marco Rubio gets in the next presidential election, it won't change.
Well, it might change. At some point, Gorbachev came in and changed all of thinking in the Soviet Union, despite having been part of the apparatus for decades. But
Didn't last long.
No, but he did enough that he reformed it. But I think one of the people who's really driving this is Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, and he's just another Trump. He's a billionaire who's made money in some other angle, doesn't particularly understand politics, but because he's rich, he thinks he's a genius and everyone should listen to him. He's the one who was behind the Gordie Howe Bridge threat from Trump, that he wasn't going to allow it to open because he had talked to the people in Detroit who owned the Ambassador Bridge, and they said, Canada's screwing us. Well, I said, that's all you have to say to Trump and his administration, is that Canada's pulling one over on you, and they're there.
That's exactly right. It's it's people have always said that Trump, maybe not so much recently, but that Trump could be convinced to do almost anything by the last person he talked to.
Yeah.
Like that he could be convinced to adopt a position. And I mean, Matty Maroon, I don't know how many people know who he is, but I mean, this guy's like a cartoon robber baron villain. He owns the Ambassador Bridge between Windsor and Detroit, which is the only existing truck route. So he holds, God knows how much trade hostage over that. I mean, your average car probably goes across that bridge twice before it gets on the lot. So I mean, that was just stupid. And why would you anger Michigan?
That is perplexing. Look, the only way we're getting the tariffs on Canada lifted, though, is through negotiated settlement. And I want to point out that this past week, we sent 370 people, government officials, bureaucrats, elected officials, business leaders, lobbyists, not to Washington. We sent them to Mexico on a 6-day trade junket to try and convince the Mexicans to stick with us in CUSMA at a time when the Americans are talking about getting rid of CUSMA and just having 2 bilateral deals. And I point out that in the last year, in the middle of all this, we have not done a similar charm offensive with Washington. We've sent Dominic LeBlanc and a couple of bureaucrats with him down for meetings. We sent Prime Minister Carney down. We haven't done a similar trade initiative, and the exports that we send to the Americans are worth 68 times what we send to Mexico. To me, it seems like the Carney guys realize, okay, dealing with Trump is tough. Being seen to fight with him is good for me politically. Let's keep the fight going. Do you think that they want a deal, or do you think they like the fight because it helps them politically, Lorne?
No, I think you're absolutely right. There is no consideration in the mind of a liberal that Trump's, I use this pun, that overshadows their reelection. They would kill all the firstborn children in the country if they thought it would get them reelected. And that's the reason they are the most successful political organization in the Western world in the last 100 years, is that that's all they focus on. Like, we were talking a little bit earlier, and I assume we're going to get into this a little bit later, about Jamal Giovanni, who went, the conservative MP who went to Washington to talk to Trump and then came back and said, we have to stop getting ourselves in a tizzy over the United States. We should be working with Trump. Blah, blah, blah. He should be working in the Liberal war room, because he is making commercials for them that they will use in the next election, which I expect will be within the next.
And yet he's right.
Well, he may be right.
He's 100% right.
He may be right, but I don't think he is. He's too tight with J.D. Vance, who he met in law school at Yale, and he's too Trumpian. But what the Conservative Party in Canada needs is its own Canadian conservative response to Trump. And I would fault Poilievre for a year of not coming up with one.
I mean, all I would say is that I just don't think it's possible to conclude a deal with Donald Trump, because he'll just turn around the next day and say, I don't like this deal anymore. I mean, he signed the free trade deal that he now wants to get rid of. I certainly agree that we should, for the greater good, we should put up with Trump as best we can and make the best of it. And if that involves flattering the guy, then fair enough. But I don't think there's any charm offensive that can do it. I don't think there's any charm offensive that's going to win over this administration. Their whole thing is just, the art of the deal, right? This is him negotiating. This is his genius with the full force of the greatest, military and economic power in the world behind him. I mean, what a genius he is for managing to bully people with that. I just don't think. I mean, Carney went to Mar-a-Lago. I'm not sure what else they had nice photos.
No, you didn't go. You went to Washington. You went to the White House
right,
twice,
sorry.
not Mar-a-Lago. Let's do a quick round on Jamil Jivani and the reaction to that. Is more reaction to him saying Canadians have to stop having a hissy fit, which when you look at it in the whole context, he's talking about protecting jobs and we need to protect jobs and that's why he's doing what he does and let's stop having a hissy fit. More reaction to that than a Liberal MP standing in the House of Commons calling him Unity Mitford, a Nazi sympathizer, and by extension, Trump is Adolf Hitler. And David Hurley saying he's too ugly to be successful in politics. I thought the guy was doing, and we had him on the podcast. I took him at his word that I thought he was trying to do what was good for Canada. I mean, we've had this talk of let's have a Team Canada approach, and then this guy who's besties with the VP comes forward and says, let me help you. And the Liberals say, no, we'd rather attack you because it helps us politically.
I don't recall him saying, let us help you.
Let me help you. As far back as November, he offered to go down and work with the Liberals as part of the conversation, and they said no.
Sorry, I meant recently with this last trip. But yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think hissy fit was a ridiculous thing to say, just for a politician, just not a good idea. And I don't think it's fair. I mean, if his point is Canadian jobs being in great peril, and that is thanks to Donald Trump. I mean, the Canadian, say what you will about Canada's, contribution to global affairs, but I mean, the auto industry works pretty well. And that exists across the Quebec or across the Windsor-Detroit border, essentially. I think a hissy fit's completely understandable. Frankly, not useful, but nor would I criticize people for being really upset about it.
All right. When we come back, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about floor crossings and Matt Jeneroux, who said he needed to leave politics to spend more time with his family, and apparently has spent enough time with his family because he's a Liberal now.
What's going on? I'm Arch Manning, Viore athlete and college quarterback. Whether I'm running, training, traveling, or just unwinding at home, I love doing it in my core shorts from Viore. With a breathable boxer brief liner, they're quick to dry, super versatile, and stand up to even my most intense training sessions. Plus, they come in 3 inseams and a ton of colors. Ready to try a pair? Go to viore.com/arch and get 20% off at checkout. I think you're going to love them as much as I do. That's VUORI.com/ARCH and get 20% off your first order. Exclusions apply. Visit the website for full terms and conditions. Not only will you receive 20% off your first purchase, but enjoy free shipping on any U.S. orders over $75 and free returns. Have a great day.
Hey, it's Sterling K. Brown from the Hulu original series Paradise. The next chapter begins as Xavier's search for his wife takes him above ground, and what he finds will change everything. It was never just about the bunker. Tune in and discover the truth lies outside. Paradise, the official podcast, is now streaming, and stream Paradise on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
There were so many missed opportunities to catch this before the devastating thing happened.
A third of them we found literally in the phone book. These people were not afraid. They knew that nobody was effectively hunting them. They knew they had escaped justice, that they were going to die in their beds.
When I give talks at law schools, is that the charter ultimately is empowering a minority, and it's empowering a minority that's a guild across the country, and it's a fairly elite guild, and the guild is lawyers.
Families who were split by referendum, and brothers and sisters who never talked to each other for years after the referendum because they were so angry at each other because of emotions on both sides.
The reason he was assassinated was not because he was trying to put a satellite into space, but because the gun that he was creating had other applications that made him and the gun very dangerous.
It's finally here. A new season of Canada Did What? Post-media podcast that revisits the big Canadian political events you might think you remember and tells you the real story you never knew. I'm Tristan Hopper. The voices you just heard are from our brand new Season 2. We will unpack some of the pivotal moments that helped define our country, often without a vote, usually without a plan, and sometimes without anyone admitting what they'd done. We'll find out how Canada became a welcoming paradise for untold numbers of Nazi war criminals after the Second World War. We let them build monuments to their wartime exploits and even ended up honoring a Nazi fighter in the House of Commons. And I'm sorry to say that none of that happened by accident. We'll bring you the little-known story of a troubled Canadian rocket scientist who turned to a sinister life of selling giant guns to terrible people. And if that sounds like a spy novel, it ends like one too. You'll hear the behind-the-scenes story of Quebec's attempted secession from Canada and how very close we came to a political crisis that would have made Brexit look like a picnic. You'll hear about how the much-celebrated Charter of Rights and Freedoms turned into something its creators never wanted, and how many of the most extravagant warnings about the document were all quickly proven true. And you'll even hear about how authorities bungled multiple chances to stop the deadliest terrorist attack in our country's history, and then proceeded to pretend it never happened. These aren't dusty history lessons. They're stories about power, ambition, madness, and the things about Canada that a lot of people would rather ignore. But not you. You won't want to miss an episode. Subscribe to make sure you get all of Season 2 starting March 2026, anywhere you get your podcasts.
So I had announced my resignation back in November, largely due to the family reasons, but quite simply couldn't sit on the sidelines after seeing what the Prime Minister was, the ambitious agenda he was undertaking across the country and across the world. And quite honestly, it was the speech in Davos where you took everything head on, and I think for me that's where a lot of the world changed. I think it opened a lot of eyes for Canadians, Albertans, Edmontonians, just how serious this national unity crisis truly is. And it's for me, it felt disingenuous and quite simply wrong to be sitting on the sidelines anymore. So I reached out to the Prime Minister's office, and will be joining his caucus, and I couldn't be more proud to do.
Excellent. There you have it, Matt Jeneroux once again saying he couldn't sit on the sidelines. I mean, he was leaving politics, wasn't he? Lorne, let's start with you on this because he is an Edmonton area MP. He may not be your member of parliament, but he's from the Edmonton area. I looked through all the records, and of course, Edmonton Riverbend, that the riding he represents, has only been around since 2015, and it's been stitched together over the years and changed, and boundaries have moved. The only thing that could come close to finding a Liberal to represent this area was a guy named Hugh Harry in 1968, represented part of Edmonton. that, was kind of in that area. And he lasted one term. That was the last Liberal in that part of Edmonton. Does Matt Jeneroux have a chance at winning? Before we get into whether it's good or bad, does he have a chance of winning again as a Liberal?
No, I don't think so. And there have been at the provincial level ridings within the larger federal riding that have gone Liberal over the years, 2 or 3 times. And in fact, there was even one NDP member elected from a part of that federal riding. So is it possible with the right issues and the right national campaign that it could go to the Liberals? Yes, I think it is possible. But as you said, it's very, very unlikely. And Jeneroux personally will not win after this.
Why?
Just people think this is disloyal. I am a firm believer, as a lot of people are, that you were elected to represent your constituents as the member of a particular party. If you decide to cross the floor, you should be required to step down, run in a by-election to reaffirm that that's what your constituents want. And he's not going to do that. And I don't think he's going to be terribly effective with the Liberals. They're not going to make him a minister.
He's an advisor on international trade and defense and security issues.
Exactly. I could be named an advisor on defense issues.
Chris, let me read off the results of a Leger poll for Post Media. It was about 3 weeks ago this came out. What preferred process when a member of parliament changes party affiliation? 38% of Canadians said they should be required to run in a special by-election to get approval of voters in his or her riding for changing parties. 26% said they should be required to sit as an independent until the next general election. 20% said they should be allowed to continue to cross the floor with no conditions, as is currently the case. And 15% said, I don't know, and looked down at their shoes. Where do you come down?
As a practical matter, there will never be a rule that says any of those things, because no party would actually support such a rule if it had any teeth, because they want people.
Well, the New Democrats would, but they will never be in power.
And not many people cross the floor to them. In fact, I was looking at this the other day. I believe there's only one who's ever done it at the federal level, and it was quite a long time ago, and I can't even remember his name. He was a one-term MP, and I think he sat for the Liberals, NDP, and Tories in the same. No, I think the Tories rejected him. Sorry, that's why he ended up with the NDP. I don't think such a law is possible. And if it ever such a law existed, it would be like fixed election dates laws or balanced budgets laws, right? Like it would just be ignored or overturned if necessary when the circumstances existed.
We've had 2 laws on this at the provincial level. One in, I believe it was New Brunswick, and it was brought in by the Liberals, and then the Conservatives got rid of it when they were elected. So it was never challenged. Nobody crossed the floor. And then the Conservatives got in, they scrapped it. But in Manitoba, it was in place, and it said you had to either sit as an independent or quit and run in a by-election. And this was challenged in court, and it survived. That was, it was Stephen Fletcher, the former federal Conservative MP, was in Brian Pallister's Manitoba PC caucus, and they kicked him out. He didn't even cross the floor. They kicked him out, which means he changed party affiliation, and he wanted to start a new party. Well, that would mean changing party affiliation, and he's not allowed to do that. So he challenged it in court, and the judge said, no, this is allowable. So, Lorne, do you think that we should consider a law like that? Or, do you like the idea, but like Chris say, realize that turkeys won't vote for Thanksgiving?
Well, I mean, Chris is absolutely right about that. It's like proportional representation. All sorts of opposition parties love it. And then as soon as they win a majority of the seats with 42% of the vote, oh, no, we couldn't do that. We couldn't possibly do that. I would prefer it was a convention rather than a law, that it just became our habit that if you decided to switch parties in the middle of a term, you stepped down and you went honestly to your constituents and said, here's why I'm changing. Please vote for me again.
It's a very interesting poll that Brian cited. I mean, one of the things, I'm not sure I'd ever seen this question asked quite so in black and white like this. And they asked Canadians, what's your primary influence when you vote? Is it the leader of the party or the local candidate? And it was only 14% across the board who said the local candidate. And I hate that. I really hate that. And it, like, I hate the emasculate this.
If you talk to people who run election campaigns, they'll tell you it's actually lower.
Oh, yeah.
They'll claim it's 2%.
Yeah. And I hate that. I think it leads to, sheep-like behavior. And it leads people to, it sort of convinces MPs that they have less power than they actually do. So I don't want to reinforce that with a law that says, who you are doesn't matter. What matters is what the name what the party name on the ballot was. But at the same time, I think if it were a convention, which clearly isn't, that would be preferable to me. I just wanted to flag another really interesting thing in that poll, which was that, so if you look at the Liberals, look at the Conservatives, 10% of both the Liberal and Conservative voters, 10% said they voted primarily for the local candidate. But among Liberals, 63% said they voted primarily for the leader. Conservatives, 37% primarily for the leader. So I'm not even sure what that flags to me, but it seems like it flags something about the Carney-Poilievre dynamic.
And just so that people know, the total numbers, Chris said only 14% say they vote for the local candidate. 39% of all Canadians say they vote for the party, and 47% say they vote for the leader. And then I'm going to read out some numbers. I told you what people thought should happen, and should floor crossings be allowed. It really does vary by party. So 42% of all Canadians say that floor crossing should not be allowed again. And 42% say it should be allowed. 38% say no. But when you go to conservatives right now say 63% say no, it shouldn't be allowed. 62% of Liberals say it shouldn't, and it's 20% roughly in the no in the other camp for each of them. If you change governments and people were crossing the floor to the Conservatives, they would definitely stick with it and love it. All right, so let's turn to Matt Jeneroux specifically. Here's the guy that was rumored to be looking to cross the floor to the Liberals back in November when Chris d'Entremont did, and then quickly put out a weird statement saying he wasn't crossing the floor and please leave my family alone. Why? That was odd. And then said he had to go spend more time with his family. He was moving to Victoria, which is where he lives now. He doesn't even live in Edmonton, hasn't spent much time there. And then, according to a good rundown timeline by the Toronto Star, the Conservatives were working with him to select the candidate for the upcoming by-election a week or so before he crossed the floor. What do you make of his personal decision, Chris, to say, okay, I know I said all these things before, but now I'm moving on?
Well, it's absolutely shameless. I mean, I don't understand how someone does what you just described and then looks themselves in the mirror every morning. But then I'd say I've said that about a lot of politicians over the years, and not just the ones who cross the floor. It's, there's a fair amount of money in politics, not just at the time you're sitting as an MP, but afterwards, it looks good on a resume. So it all comes out in the wash, it seems like, for most of these people. And I mean, it's completely disreputable. And as Lorne says, I don't see how he wins Edmonton Riverbend, even if Carney continues sort of.
Does he have a reputation left in Edmonton, Lorne?
No, but to be quite frank, he didn't have much of a reputation to start with. He's not the best known MP in the city. He's not even the best known backbencher in the city. Our own MP, a guy named Kelly McCauley, is much better known, and he's always been a backbencher. He's not a critic. But Matt Jeneroux, when they said Matt Jeneroux was resigning rather than crossing the floor, I had to scratch my head to remember what riding he represented, because he just doesn't make much of an impression.
Kind of Chesterton's old adage about journalism. Journalism is informing the public that Lord Jones died when they didn't know that Lord Jones ever lived. Matt, who? Oh, right, that guy. I saw him once. But what does it mean for Poilievre's leadership? He just passed his leadership review with 87% of the vote. I was there in Calgary. I went to go see, was there a movement to try and unseat him? Were there dissenters? It was hard to find people dissenting. The worst you would hear is, well, who else is there? That was kind of the gist. And a lot of strong vocal support for him, by the way. That was more common than who else is there. But with a third floor crossing and the potential for a Carney majority, is this bad for Poilievre or good? Does someone ambitious waiting in the wings now say, aha, the leader's weak, now's my chance? That's what Poilievre and the people around him did with Aaron O'Toole.
Yep. That's the most ambitious person to try and get rid of Poilievre was having his own convention the same weekend in Ontario. And I know Doug Ford says he doesn't want the job. It's not what he wants. But that, I think, is a loaded rubbish. He does want the job. He's cozied up to Carney on at least a couple of occasions. Apparently was giving advice to Carney about when to hold an election. And the only reason that would work for Ford is not because he wants Carney to do well. It's because he wants Carney to beat Poilievre. Poilievre is fine within the party. Even with this latest floor crossing, he still has strong support within the party. But if he loses another election, a lot of that goes away. And he doesn't have strong support beyond the members of the party. So he hasn't got a lot of growth potential in an election because he just doesn't appeal to people other than the base in the party. And so I think he survives this. I don't think it's a real threat to his leadership, but it is a threat to him winning the next election. And if he loses another election, he's out.
I'll give you a quick list on why I don't think Doug Ford is going to be the next Conservative leader, and then I'll let Chris weigh in with his view. So you said he's cozied up to Carney. How does he become Conservative leader and then say, you got to elect me, this guy's a load of crap? He can't speak French. He doesn't like leaving Etobicoke, the suburban part of Toronto that he lives in. So can you imagine him spending all of his time in Ottawa? He would hate it. And these are not issues that he actually likes or cares about. So I know that some part of him wants to be prime minister. If you have people in your ear telling you, yeah, you'd be great at it, who wouldn't think about it? But in terms of practicality, I think it's a non-starter. And two, he'd do well in some parts and horribly in others. And I think part of where he'd do horribly would be Alberta, where I hear nothing but trash talking about of Doug Ford.
Yeah, no question. No question. He is almost as unpopular here as Justin Trudeau was.
Chris, your thoughts on Doug Ford being the guy that wants to replace Poilievre?
No, I mean, he may well want to. He's been doubted at every stage and is now Premier of Ontario, and to my eye can be Premier of Ontario for life at this point as it stands. I mean, he's never faced a Liberal leader in the legislature. He was first elected in 2018. Like, that's madness. So the Liberals, the NDP are never going to win.
So that people get what Chris is saying here, though, let's explain. Kathleen Wynne resigned as leader. They haven't had a leader with a seat since then in 2018. That's why he's never faced a Liberal leader. And by the way, the NDP is the official opposition, but you wouldn't know it, and you wouldn't know who the leader of that party is.
Exactly. So I like what he really wants to be is mayor of Toronto. But, being Premier of Ontario, you can pretty much be mayor of Toronto if you want to be, because you could do anything you want to Toronto. To me, the bigger threat to Poilievre's leadership than these floor crossings, which just, within the party, I could see some people thinking, oh, he's losing control of it, although his leadership review would suggest not. But in the broader electorate, I don't think people care about that. To me, the biggest problem for Poilievre is the NDP absolutely. I mean, this leadership race is I'm not sure they'll win a seat. I mean, Alexandre Boularice is defecting supposedly to Quebec Solidaire, and he's going into provincial politics because he doesn't think, and that's their last MP in Quebec. I mean,
and a strong MP.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, to me, and that was kind of the story of the last election, right? Was that the Conservatives did so much better than any party for many years in terms of the popular vote, but the Liberals did a little bit better because the NDP collapsed. So that, to me, is the biggest threat. I mean, not just to Poilievre, but to the Conservatives.
Harper doesn't win 10, 15 years ago without a strong NDP presence, because they take away just enough Liberal votes that the Conservatives can sneak in. As long as the Liberals are unopposed on the left, they get to be the government for as long as they want.
Well, I think the Conservatives have to come up with a way to fix that. And I'm not sure what that is, but that may be the new normal, especially if someone like Avi Lewis wins the leadership of the NDP. I mean, he was out there the other day in their leadership debate talking about the need for government-run grocery stores, government-run cell phone companies, government-run internet providers, and a government-owned and run bank through Canada Post. They can't deliver your mail properly, but sure, I'm going to give them my money.
That's what the kids want, postal banking.
That makes him more reasonable than Heather McPherson, who is the other major candidate, who is totally obsessed, completely obsessed with Palestine, Hamas, and the destruction of Israel.
I don't know. I would say Avi Lewis is
I'm not
just
sure.
as
I'm
obsessed.
not sure Avi Lewis is much better on that front.
Yeah. No, I think. I mean, sometimes I see Avi Lewis make an announcement that doesn't involve Israel or Gaza, and think, well, yeah, but what does this have to do with Israel and Gaza? Like,
yeah, it seems like the NDP wants to run for the parliament that Donald Trump's going to set up with his Board of Peace in the reformed Gaza.
Well, it's a leadership race, right? I mean, those are always different than general elections, but you still say what you say, and it's on the record, and it's going to be used against you.
Where's the economic approach from the NDP, who used to be the Assembly Line Workers Party, and then they became the Faculty Club Party? They lost an awful lot of their private sector union support. But at least they had teachers and professors and civil servants, of whom there is a large growing number in this. They can't even win that group anymore.
So, assuming that the NDP does not resurrect with their next leader, and I'm expecting Audrey McDonough type energy from the next NDP leader.
Alexa
McDonough. Yeah, sorry. It's combining Audrey McLaughlin and Alexa McDonough.
You combined two people.
Both of them were not good performers. So assuming it's that level of excitement among the electorate, what do the Conservatives do to still have a chance at winning with a very weak NDP?
Get a new leader?
Lorne says no.
I don't know. I don't have anything against Pierre Poilievre, but I agree with Lorne that I don't see how he has room to grow. And then if the NDP collapses, I don't see I just don't see another path.
Well, I don't see, I don't see how the Liberals become so unpopular between now and the end of the year or the middle of next year, or whenever elections are held. I don't see how they become so unpopular that they lose. It is their election to lose, and they're not going to. I mean, certainly Central Canadians have cozied up to Mark Carney. Certainly our colleagues at the Globe and the CBC and the Star all think he's dreamy, and they buy into his shtick against Trump.
And so do a lot of people in your cohort, Lauren. It's boomer voters love him.
Yeah, but not out here. So I say I don't see a way, new leader, no new leader, how the Conservatives beat the Liberals in the next election. I'm predicting the Liberals will go north of 200 seats, maybe close to 220. Like it's just going to be a bloodbath.
So you're predicting juggernaut.
Yep.
All right. Well, I hope it's a Paul Martin type juggernaut, and maybe they hire David Hurley, who believes Jamil Jawani's too ugly for politics, to try and run all of this. But we shall see. Gents, we'll leave it at that, and I'm sure we'll talk again in the coming weeks or months once Mark Carney has secured his majority, whether it's by floor crossings, by elections, or a general election. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Brian.
Full Comment is a Post Media podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. This episode was produced by Andre Prue. Theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. Make sure you hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a like, leave us a review, tell your friends about us. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Brian Lilly.
There were so many missed opportunities to catch this before the devastating thing happened.
A third of them we found literally in the phone book. These people were not afraid. They knew that nobody was effectively hunting them. They knew they had escaped justice, that they were going to die in their beds.
When I give talks at law schools, is that the charter ultimately is empowering a minority, and it's empowering a minority that's a guild across the country, and it's a fairly elite guild, and the guild is lawyers.
Families who were split by referendum, and brothers and sisters who never talked to each other for years after the referendum because they were so angry at each other because of emotions on both sides.
The reason he was assassinated was not because he was trying to put a satellite into space, but because the gun that he was creating had other applications that made him and the gun very dangerous.
It's finally here. A new season of Canada Did What? Post Media podcast that revisits the big Canadian political events you might think you remember and tells you the real story you never knew. I'm Tristan Hopper. The voices you just heard are from our brand new Season 2. We will unpack some of the pivotal moments that helped define our country, often without a vote, usually without a plan, and sometimes without anyone admitting what they'd done. We'll find out how Canada became a welcoming paradise for untold numbers of Nazi war criminals after the Second World War. We let them build monuments to their wartime exploits and even ended up honoring a Nazi fighter in the House of Commons. And I'm sorry to say that none of that happened by accident. We'll bring you the little-known story of a troubled Canadian rocket scientist who turned to a sinister life of selling giant guns to terrible people. And if that sounds like a spy novel, it ends like one too. You'll hear the behind-the-scenes story of Quebec's attempted secession from Canada and how very close we came to a political crisis that would have made Brexit look like a picnic. You'll hear about how the much-celebrated Charter of Rights and Freedoms turned into something its creators never wanted, and how many of the most extravagant warnings about the document were all quickly proven true. And you'll even hear about how authorities bungled multiple chances to stop the deadliest terrorist attack in our country's history and then proceeded to pretend it never happened. These aren't dusty history lessons. They're stories about power, ambition, madness, and the things about Canada that a lot of people would rather ignore. But not you. You won't want to miss an episode. Subscribe to make sure you get all of Season 2 starting March 2026 anywhere you get your podcasts.